Welcome back to the Cal 40 Restoration. In our last episode, we announced that we're going to take this boat and race the Trans-Pacific Race, which starts July 3rd. That's really lit a fire under everybody involved to try and get the boat completed and ready for this event. We'll be going over a lot of that and what's required to go on Transpac in another episode. And today what we want to do is to show you what's been done to the boat, both on the bottom and the top sides, on deck and down below, to show you how we're making progress on the systems. Before we get started with the review, I wanted to explain that we found a name for the boat. Now, we threw a lot of things out on the table and talked about a lot of different names. We were looking for something that was really representative of the beauty of California. This being a California-built boat and being a Cal Boat brand. So in the end, we came up with the name Sequoia, which represents the beautiful giant redwood trees of the southern Sierra Nevada. So we're going to start here at the bottom with the rudder. We've got our new rudder installed. We retained our old rudder, and I wanted to explain why we went to a new rudder. This one was an original, and they kind of call these the barn door. They're fairly wide, fairly thick, and not as deep as the new one. But what happened when we took it out, slid it out and turned it over, we got all kinds of rust coming out of it because moisture eventually finds its way into the shaft. This is a 3-inch pipe, and we had a lot of corrosion and chunks and flakes of metal coming out of it, which is pretty disconcerting when you realized how old it was. So we went to Finco in Southern California, who makes these rudders. They were originally designed by a naval architect here in the Bay, Carl Schumacher, and they have a mold for this, and they built this beautiful rudder. And just to explain the difference here, this is what's called an elliptical rudder. This old rudder was 48 inches deep. This one is 54 inches deep. We get an extra 6 inches of depth, which is really helpful off the wind. More of the area is in the center of the blade. You can see how wide this is. This is, let's see, about 29 inches. This one at the boat is about 23 inches. So it's a narrower profile, little slimmer rudder, about the same surface area as the old one, but a more effective foil for steering the boat. And the extra depth really gives you a big advantage when you're in big seas. So we just didn't feel right about this. We were worried that this was going to break off or corrode or further than it already is. Just didn't have confidence in it. Another element of this is that this is a thinner profile. Our old rudder was approximately 5 inches wide at the boat. This one, as we measure it, comes out at about 3.5 inches. So we have a much narrower profile, much more aerodynamic, with all the area in the right places and a greater depth for control off the wind. Thanks to our friends at PYI giving us a recommendation on the correct prop for this boat, we've received our Max prop, and that's a feathering prop, and it's a 2-blade. And what happens here is when it's in its drive position, these blades are fully deployed, and it works like a conventional fixed blade prop. The advantage of this one, though, however, is when it goes the other direction into reverse, it's still using the same pitch and the same leading edge for the reverse motion. Now, it takes a little while to get your head around how these things work, but basically if you force your hand against one side of the blade, that'll bring it to a drive position. If you push your hand on the other side of the blade, it'll bring it to its reversing position. But the beauty of these are, after you shut the power down and you get the shaft aligned correctly, they orient themselves, oops, a little tight, so that there is absolutely no resistance whatsoever while you're racing. And that's a very clean, very well proven system, and I'm really happy we have the right one for the boat and the power plant that we have on this boat. In addition to that, we added a zinc to the collar. I think Ian made a very good point about the necessity of having this, and we're going to make sure that we stay up with this, especially on the first few days after launch. Make sure there are no stray currents running through the boat. So moving on to the keel, I think if you remember some of our early shots and the shots of the boat upside down about how miserable this keel was, And it's good that Jim Antrim noticed how bad it was, because he created the templates for us so we could try and get it reshaped to its original lines. So this has all been filled. There's no hollows in it anymore. We went right down to bare fiberglass and then started building the materials up to fair it out with the putties. And then glassed over that, and then did some more fairing and sanding until we got this thing perfectly fair. We did longboard sanding in here. The bottom of it has been longboard sanded, and it's absolutely beautiful. There's not an imperfection in it. So we tried to minimize the number of through hulls in the boat. There are some that have to be underwater. This is the engine pickup in the keel. We tried to get it as smooth as possible and faired in, which we have. Going forward to that, one we're still working on is the knot meter transducer. This is more of a flat mushroom shaped. We were looking for one that was a total flush fitting. We couldn't really find it with this manufacturer. So we're going to do some fairing in here in this general area to get this all smooth again. The only other through hulls in the boat are for head intake, the sink drain, and we have over here the discharge, which is used for the head offshore. Otherwise, everything gets flowed over to the holding tank. That's it, basically. One of the little trick things that Cree wanted to do is to try and minimize drag on all the through hulls. So by the time the water gets around the rudder, there's quite a bit of turbulence. So he was suggesting, rather than having two cockpit drains on either side, that we do one larger cockpit drain right here, where it would be hidden right under the rudder. There's plenty of surface area for the water to flow, but it's in an area where there's not going to be much impact by having a through hull underwater. And it just makes the boat that much more slippery in the water, less resistance. One area in our boat that took a lot of conversation and a lot of decision making was the transom. Now, I've seen some boats in the yard here where they've added equipment with time, and they'll have one bilge pump over here and another vent over here and another this over there, and pretty soon it looks like somebody shot the transom with a shotgun. So we wanted this to be really clean, and since we were starting with no equipment at all, we consolidated the through hulls down to two major through hulls. One is for the engine and the engine exhaust, and the other one combines two bilge pumps into one overboard discharge. So we have the large 2-inch Edson pump, and then our smaller bilge pump feeds in from the side right at the transom, so we didn't have another separate hole. We just wanted to keep the clean look of the boat all the way through and minimize the amount of individual fittings. In addition, we wanted to find a home for the man overboard pole. Now, many boats just put them up the backstay, but that's additional windage. And then our backstay, because it's going to be a split backstay, split mechanical cascade system, didn't really give us the opportunity to have the man overboard pole attached to it. Our man overboard pole is going to be tied to our horseshoe ring and a drogue. So when this line has the drogue on it, it pulls this, and our man overboard pole just slides out and falls in the water. So on deck, we've completed almost all the installation of the hardware. We have our new stem head fitting, which replaced the old bronze stem head fitting. As it turns out, I found out that a lot of Cal 40 owners are having trouble with their old bronze stem heads because they really don't have great lateral resistance aft, so some of them are starting to bend. There are some stainless steel replacements for that original casting, but we decided to do a fabrication instead. And so this is a little lighter, a little daintier. To that, we've attached all brand new rod rigging from BSI with their calibrated turnbuckles. It's just a beautiful setup, very nice. The rigging's all polished and tying into the Ballinger spar. We put two of the Schaefer chocks forward for moorings and docking. And then one fun one that we did, there was an original cove light just like this in the boat. Both of the ones that were in this boat were damaged. One of them had fallen out, the cover for it. So working with some other Cal 40 owners, I found a guy who was going to be sailing back from Hawaii with us up in Seattle. He'd taken these off of his Cal 40. He gave them to me. I had them re-chromed. So we have an original set of running lights that fit nicely into that cove. teak rail adds a beautiful accent and color to the boat. Bow rail was done by Svensson's Metalwork here in Alameda, California, just down the street. And they did a beautiful job. We talked about the radiuses, we talked about flaring it out to match the hull lines, having it extend off the stem head. And they just did a beautiful job with that. Chris and his crew down at Svensson's Metalworks. Hats off to them because it really makes the boat. It's just a beautiful, perfect piece. So now that we've touched on what's happened here on the bow, we're up on deck. And this gray non-skid that we have is a product called Kiwi Grip. It rolls on, it's sort of a stipple color, it has a nice non-skid texture to it. It takes a couple days to dry. It's been hard to stay off of it, but we've tried. Our poles, spinnaker poles, are port and starboard. They're 4-spar carbon poles. The new hatch that went in, we did all the fiberglass work here and put a new Lewmar hatch in, one of the Ocean Series hatches. Back aft here at the mast, we've brought all the halyards down through Schaefer lead blocks and Schaefer turning blocks back to our winches. So we've done 2 winches aft on the house for the halyards, and then our wing halyards are taken off of here on 2 more winches mid-deck. We have some pad eyes here which are going to be used for the external spinnaker halyards, which we'll probably use on Transpac. That cuts down quite a bit on halyard chafe and makes the boat simpler and gives us a lot of spare halyards. We've mounted 1 set of inboard tracks now with fixed lead blocks. With our standard 1¼ T-track, we can add adjustable cars at any time. And then, since this is really where the location of the blade will be, the 150 will be further aft, and to adjust it, we're going to use the inboard lead and then use barber haulers to take the thing out if we want to adjust the lead in and out or fore and aft. So we've used Ontel stoppers here, which at the recommendation of New England Rope, and we've reinforced all the covers on our Spectra halyards to resist the chafe and get it up to the right diameter for the stoppers. We've added a Vangmaster pneumatic vang. This is a mechanical pneumatic. Basically what happens is we have a block and tackle that works off of this, and that compresses it and it'll support the boom. It has an air fitting down here, very high quality unit. I really like the look of it, very popular out here in the Bay Area. Here we had 2 Dorade boxes, but the Dorade boxes in my opinion are beautiful, but they do tend to be quite massive. They tend to trip you up a little bit. There's a big ventilator on top of them. It made it hard to route all the lines, so what we're using is solar powered vents. These are the old Nicro FICO, now Marinco vents, and they run 24 hours a day. They have an old NiCad battery inside of them. They charge themselves during the day. The fan runs, and then at night it runs all night long until just moving volumes of air out of the cabin. I found them to be very effective. I'm going to put 2 more in some of the hatches here when we're done. And I think that's really going to help the ventilation inside the boat. So on top of our new engine box, we have the perfect height for being the pit boss here, where you can get to the winches, you get to the stoppers, and you can be involved in doing the takedowns on the sails. And in this case, we're going to be using a loose-footed mainsail on the boom, so whenever a spinnaker comes down, it comes down as a mail slot over and down into the cockpit. So it's a nice height, nice place to work, and it keeps them at 1 person out of the cockpit and keeps everything very organized. As we move back and into the sun, I'll show you what our cockpit looks like. Many episodes and many months ago that we did a whole series on this program about laminating the tiller using steam bending. Well, this is the tiller that you saw being made. It's teak and oak, and it's in a beautiful curve. It allows you to stand up and drive like this. If you have to, you can sit down and drive. And it just has a beautiful natural curve that complements the boat. On either side on our winch islands, we have 2 Lewmar 50 primaries and 2 Lewmar 48 secondaries. And they're set on these teak rings that are laminated up. And that levels them so that we can actually do some cross shading if we want to. The original angles kind of prevented that. And it's going to give us plenty of juice for pulling in sails. Back aft, we have one more Lewmar winch, which is going to a turning block, and we're going to have a split backstay with a cascading control block system on it going to this Lewmar 46, and that'll give us enough pressure easy to get a couple thousand pounds on the backstay, which is about the sweet spot for this boat, from what I understand. Port and starboard, we put really large gates on this boat. It's really nice. A typical gate is like 24 inches. We made these 36. It allows you to kind of fish in a cooler if you're bringing a cooler aboard, and if you're carrying any large gear, it's a nice, nice big gate system. It's not common. Sometimes people just make it so their Pelican hooks drop off here and there's no support out there, but I wanted to support in the cockpit because people often like to sit right here on the winch island and put their back against this. So we put the gates at the convenient spot as far forward as we dared, and we made it so we can get things on and off the boat really easy. The Traveler is being mounted here. It's not in yet. We still have to do some paint for the non-skid. And of course, we have our teak washboards that are not in yet. We're saving those to put them on the boat the last thing when all of our engine box and other really heavy construction stuff is done, because we don't want them to get them marked up. So it's really come together very well. The aft hatch is being non-skidded as we speak, as is the propane locker over here. And this propane locker is amazing. It's just perfect. You can get 2 full propane bottles plus all the little small bottles for the barbecue in there. When you go into cruising, you're going to want to have propane for cooking. And that gives us a nice safe place to do it. It vents directly overboard. And it's just a nice spacious cockpit. We'll have an awning that goes over the boom. And I'm looking forward to some really good fun times with family and friends on this boat, doing cruising and racing. Down below, there's much unfinished. As you can see, moving forward here, we have the V-berth area. We've added a 35-gallon water tank up in the bow. We haven't put the deck fill hose in yet, but we'll get it hooked up soon. The head area, we have the head mounted, but again, it's not plumbed. That'll get done later. And there's a holding tank right here on the starboard side and what used to be the hanging locker. And that, again, has not been plumbed completely yet. Again, more projects to do as we approach the start. The mast is in, the mast step is down. We made a little fiberglass candy dish, I call it. That keeps the water from rolling into the floor of the main salon and directs it to a drain hole we have in the front side of the mast. The mast is the Ballinger standard base, which allows us with these slots to move the mast fore or aft until we get the thing perfectly tuned. This is the new chain plate that we tied the main bulkhead in with. This is our new bulkhead running fore and aft. And then all the wiring from the spar comes down, takes a loop, and then comes back up here to a master panel on the other side of this bulkhead. Most of the wires that come out of the mast run down through the step and back to our navigational area. So a lot of thought's been given to trying to keep things neat and organized and logical. So we fabricated this new engine box, and it's a beauty. It's going to be really great. Instead of the old stairs that we had to pull off a full engine box, this opens it up so we can use the storage space back in here for day-to-day items and maybe even some food prep. It makes a really nice, comfortable height and position for working in the galley. It gets you out of the line of the stove. Over on the other side, you come over here and sit down, and you can actually, when we get this all finished, you have almost a full-size chart table here, which is going to be great for the navigation system and navigation tools, which will be mounted right here. So it's all coming together. I thought maybe the next thing we do is show you how cramped our engine compartment actually became. Because we were fighting for real estate in our last episode, and somehow or another we got it all in there. So this box lifts off. And I'm going to throw this in the cockpit, and exposes the day-to-day stuff that we're worried about with our engine. We can get here, we can check the oil, we can check the fluids. We check the fluids in the transmission, kind of do a visual inspection of everything. We can check our fuel filter and our water filter. So it gives us the really good access on a day-to-day basis. And then the second step comes off if we need additional access. Put that right there. And as you can see, our engine compartment really did fill up. And then there's a lift-out panel here. Put to the side. And this is what it took. We have all these things going in. The exhaust hose here going down. The exhaust going out is coming out of the water muffler, which is down in the bilge. It's giving us very good access to everything, both the front and the back. But it is crowded. This is the 2-inch crash pump hose. We got it to route right next to the engine without it touching. The engine controls are right here. And again, we have the ability to really service this engine, which was critical to me. Because I've seen so many installations where there are big parts of the engine you couldn't even get to. And although it's a very reliable diesel, it's still going to need service. The significant thing here is you're noticing a bunch of wires hanging down. That's because we're in the process of routing both DC, or the 12-volt system, and the AC system. To the port side is a new panel that is used for the AC, or the shore power. And on the starboard side, there is a new 12-volt panel that do all the distribution of 12-volt circuits in the boat. We're going to be using a new system that people use. They're using what we call hot boxes. I'll show you one of those in a second. And we're going to locate the 4 of those strategically through the boat, so we're not running as many wires to the 12-volt panel. The AC and DC systems are linked by an inverter charger system. In this case, a Zentrac 2050. So I think between the different systems we have, the alternator, the solar panels, and the fact that we've used so many LED lights throughout the entire boat, including the running lights, our power draw should be minimal. And really limited to big consumers will be whatever we do through the inverter and the single sideband radio. I mentioned earlier that we're using a bunch of sub boxes, which I affectionately call hot boxes. And we're going to use 4 of these throughout the boat. There are going to be 2 on the port side and 2 on the starboard side. And what this is going to allow us to do is run one heavy line to our 12-volt DC. And then we can take up to 6 separate circuits off of this. Basically, this works for anything that has an on or off switch. And it's really a nice little package. You put the negative here and positive here. It has stab lock breakers, which are the automotive breakers. You can get these in all kinds of different amp ratings. So we're able to set up both the DC negative on here from a lead and the positive. So let's say we're getting into an area like our galley and our navigation section over here. We can add one of these boxes to either side of the bulkhead up high, and then we can attach each one of our navigational tools. So our chart plotter can be plugged into this, our VHF radio can be plugged into it, the AIS system can be plugged into it. We can also plug the lighting we're going to have here, because we're going to have both red night lighting and our regular cabin light. And you can get them all in one package and keep adding circuits. And that really keeps the complexity of the panel behind here very simple. We're going to be able to do a nice job of routing fewer number of breakers. And you don't have to have as big a panel, because you're not trying to have a separate fuse or panel for each item in the boat. And it really adds to the expansion ability of the system. And And as you add and subtract gear, basically anything that isn't required to have a separate breaker for its on and off, like let's say running lights, very difficult to use one of these. You're still going to need like a running light switch. You're still going to need your fresh water pump and your manual bilge pump override, all need to be on the panel. But anything where it has its own on or off switch, these are really great for trying to keep the complexity of your wiring diagram down and make it much neater installation. So one part of our boat that didn't finish up very well was this old bulkhead to the companionway. We had several old instruments. They used to make very large instruments that required large cutouts. We've glassed over those and filled them with foam. There's been quite a bit of damage through here for the old stairs that we had. This is the back of the new compass. We were able to save the old compass holes. So I think what we're going to end up doing is using a veneer of mahogany that's going to match the rest of the grains of the materials. We'll sand this down and then laminate that piece of mahogany on here. And then we'll mount all of our other hardware and electronics on board. We were actually lucky that the thing came out as well as it did, but it's just not good enough for the finish level. And then there'll be some interior mahogany trim here as well. So it will clean up. We're trying very hard to get the boat in the water today. We recognize there's a lot of things yet to do, but there's nothing that has to be done in the yard. Having the boat in the water will allow us to get the rig finished, and we can start working on getting the boat sailing, which is really critical because we have to get some practice and get this boat tuned up prior to the Transpac race. And time is of the essence, so we're going to launch and next week get a lot of the rest of these interior items finished. We have the rest of the furniture that's still in New Bedford will be shipped out, and the boat will come back together between now and the middle of April, and we should be able to get the boat out sailing in a couple of weeks with the basic sails that are coming from Pineapple Sails.